Heavy metal is hard music for hard people. Or is it? Metal has always been infused with this larger-than-life bravado that I love, but is it only for tough guys? Let's discuss it on episode 188 of Heavy Metal Philosophy. Rant incoming! Welcome, metalheads. I'm the host of Heavy Metal Philosophy and writer for Metal Digest, Jon Barbas. Make sure you stick around to the end of the episode for this week's riff of the week. Alright, now before I make my broader point, let's set some expectations here. This is not going to be one of those metal is for everyone, man sort of episodes. This will not be a call for inclusiveness. Metal is not inclusive. But here's the thing. Metal does not exclude people for superficial reasons. Metal excludes people based on values and personal taste. By the very nature of the way it sounds, it's going to attract a very certain kind of person and turn off everybody else. The moment some normie hears this, they are out. And here you might be thinking I'm talking about extreme metal, but no, I'm talking about all metal. You take even the most popular acts and they look niche in comparison to pop acts. Look at a band like Sleep Token, who at the time of this recording has 3.7 monthly Spotify listeners. Bring Me the Horizon has 14.2 million, and the mighty Metallica has 27 million monthly Spotify listeners. Now, compare that to Taylor Swift, who has 93 million, or The Weeknd, who has 120 million. Even bands that extreme metalheads will claim are not metal, bands that fully embrace the pop sound and aesthetic like Bad Omens or Linkin Park, are only a fraction of the music industry. Because the fact is, the moment that heavy guitar hits and someone starts screaming, the overwhelming majority of people are out. And this has changed slightly as screaming has become a bit more accepted in the mainstream, but you can see from these numbers that it's still a small amount. Even the most popular metal band of all time, who has multiple different generations of fans, has far fewer monthly listeners than a newer pop act. So you see, metal doesn't need gatekeepers or rules to keep people out, because the very sound and content of it does a good enough job of that already. You and me, we're weird people, and I love you. Now, with that being said, I don't think that gatekeeping is nearly as big of a problem as the internet does, but that's a different episode. The point of this episode is I reject the notion that listening to metal makes you tough, or that it's for tough guys. When I was a kid, I thought it did. I remember scoffing at other kids that thought Disturbed was heavy. But eventually I grew up and I learned what actually makes somebody tough. And I don't think a lot of other metalheads learned that lesson. But what do I mean by that? Well, first, let's agree on some terms. Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines tough as 1, difficult to accomplish, resolve, endure, or deal with. Or 2, capable of enduring strain, hardship, or severe labor. Now, what part of that definition is bestowed upon us merely for listening to loud riffs? In fact, listening to loud riffs might be the easiest thing that I do in my life, especially these days. Now, I can see the logic. We just talked about people being turned off by loud riffs, so you might deduce from that that they must not be as tough as us. But let's think about this for a moment. What all different kinds of people are in that population of 120 million individual monthly listeners to The Weeknd? Are there some softies in that population? For sure, probably lots of them. But there's also probably a lot of firefighters and Navy SEALs and boxers and strongmen, etc., etc. And speaking of fighters who might be considered the toughest people on earth, have you watched much MMA lately? Pay attention to their walkout songs. What is the ratio? How many of these fighters are walking out to rap and pop songs, and how many are playing metal in the arena? The last fighter I can remember that consistently had metal playing during his ring walk was Matt Brown. Shout out to Matt Brown, one of my favorite all-time fighters. But as far as these other fighters that are coming out to rap and pop, are they less tough? Would they be tougher if they came out to bolt thrower? Personally, I'd like them more if they did. Shout out to Josh Barnett. Now, let's be fair. Maybe being a professional fighter is too high of a bar, is too high of a standard to be considered tough. I definitely would understand that. I don't want to be judged by that standard. So who else is tough besides the elite of the elite? Well, I'm not claiming that I'm some tough guy. I'm definitely not. But I'm a farmer, so I find it hilarious when some smooth-handed accountant or sales rep comments on one of my videos something like, "Metal is not for snowflakes. Go be an emo." Come shovel donkey manure out of the barn with me during the hot Georgia summer, and then we'll see who's the snowflake. Come out to the farm, till this earth. Come help us butcher the chickens. My wife and child are probably tougher than you. I just find it hilarious that these tenderfoot tough guys on the internet are the first ones to clutch their pearls when some artist expresses their opinion online. And at least have an original insult. Like, for instance, one of my videos where I talked about Nick Nocturnal, someone called me and Nick Nocturnal a bunch of tampon boy cucks. Now that's an insult. That's still my favorite negative comment I've ever gotten. When I read that one, I genuinely sat at my computer and laughed out loud in real life. That was funny. Whereas this comment is so boring, and I could understand if it was a live situation. You had to come up with something on the spot to insult me. But you had all the time in the world to think of your comment, and that's the best you could come up with? Sad. And before I make my next point, I want to reiterate again, I don't think I'm some big tough guy. I don't think you are either, but let's move on. I train almost every day. It's nothing hardcore. And in fact, I would argue that listening to metal actually is a hack for my training. It actually makes it easier for me to endure the training, but it doesn't make me tough. Now, the guy across the street, the guy that owns the property across the street, that's a tough guy. He is a retired infantryman who, after he retired from the military, became a private contractor for the government. Real mercenary shit, real bolt thrower type shit. The kind of stuff where he's gone for months on end and his wife doesn't know where he's at kind of shit. And what does he do when he's home? He trains. And he's an instructor of Perqueta Tertia, which is a Filipino knife fighting martial art. This guy is huge and battle tested. He incline benches what I deadlift. And when I go over there and train, it's like, it is eye-opening. And, I always try to make these podcasts friendly for both YouTube and my audio-only listeners. I apologize to your audio-only listeners, but I'm about to put something on the screen here that's quite instructive. I went over there to do some pistol training with him, and I'm going to show y'all a picture of my target. Now, look at this target. This is not a bad shot grouping, especially considering the drill that we were running when I did this. It was a drill where my pistol was holstered, and on his command, I was to draw, fire one shot, and reholster my weapon. And this is supposed to be done within 3 seconds. So under those time constraints, I think this is a pretty decent shot grouping, especially at 10 feet with a sidearm. Now, look at my instructor, my neighbor's, look at his target. Okay, look at that shot grouping. This is the difference between somebody who, does some civilian just for fun training and a guy who trains every single day. And by the way, his goal for me was to do this within 3 seconds. All of his shots were less than 2. So I have no illusions about being a tough guy. And let me tell you something, my neighbor doesn't listen to metal. I did martial arts when I was a kid. I did it when I was in college. I'm not a badass by any means. I never even got my black belt. But what I'm saying is I've been around tough guys. I've trained with tough guys. And I know that I'm not one of them. And especially the kind of art that I consume doesn't put me in that category. I know actual tough guys, and not getting mad because someone online called you a slur is not what qualifies them as such. What, you mad, bro? Not really. I just want you to show me your entire comment history, because I have a hard time believing that you've never been mad at anything that somebody said, ever. I'm in home gym forums asking people things about creatine and they get mad, much less personal attacks. There's a whole culture of people online who follow some manosphere influence and have gotten a bunch of bootleg faux stoicism advice. As someone who's read the Stoics, and I don't mean just Marcus Aurelius meditations, or probably more likely you've had it explained to you by a TikToker, Stoicism isn't meant to be who can be the best sociopath. Yes, it was about tempering your emotions so that you can make more rational decisions. And yes, it was about accepting things that you can't control, but it was also about virtue. It wasn't, I get to act like an asshole and you have to suffer in silence, because emotions have no place in our human experience, and we're all just supposed to be a bunch of cold calculation machines, no different than computers. And that brings us back to metal. What is metal if not emotion, and in particular, anger? And not superficial anger either. How many metal songs do you know about going to the club or being in love? No, these songs are angry at the world, nay, angry at existence itself. These songs are people looking to the proverbial God and saying, why did you make us like this? And it's an inconsistent position. One of those fuck your feelings dudes, Ronnie Radke, got angry at the Thy Art is Murder situation, and he said, quote, they really want you to know that they love Satan and murder but hate bigotry. And I want to be clear, I'm not a Ronnie hater. I don't have any beef with Ronnie. I am quite entertained by his tirades and I'm ready for more. I took his side in the Sebastian Bach beef. I thought what Fantano did was somewhat irresponsible, and I admired that him and Andy from Black Veil Brides took up for each other. But in this particular scenario, let me just explain something. Satan isn't real. Death metal bands don't commit those murders they're singing about. Johnny Cash never shot a man in Reno just to watch him die. But bigotry is real. Further, how does talking shit on the internet make one tough? And let me clear up, I'm not talking about Ronnie anymore here. That's not what I mean. I mean, in general, people talking shit on the internet. How does that make them tough? And more importantly, getting mad at the response to what they said in the first place. How does that make you tough? Metal has never been the we don't take offense to anything genre. In fact, metal is offended at existence itself, at the very universe. We look to the proverbial creator and say, I reject this. So the, what, you mad, bro? Doesn't cut it for me. That's not logic and reason, and it's certainly not philosophy or morality. And let me just say, I'm not perfect here either. I've said on this podcast a couple of times that one of my favorite jokes, I was talking to my buddy about this metalcore band, and he says to me, that's like a band I would take my girlfriend to go see. And I thought that was hilarious. Please don't get mad at me, Lindsay or Death Metal Mom. I know y'all listen to the most brutal tech death, but in that moment about that band, that joke was pretty funny. It's like when I'm talking to a coworker and I say, yeah, I like metal. And they go, yeah, I like the heavy stuff too. I'm really into Shinedown. And listen, no shade at Shinedown. They've got 17 number one hits. Respect. And I don't think I'm tougher than my coworker because he does listen to Shinedown. All I'm saying is there's levels to heaviness, and those would be more accurate terms. And as far as the kind of bands that I take my girlfriend to go see, my wife and I, our compromise band when we're on a road trip in the car is like Killswitch Engage, Zeal and Ardor, stuff like that. So I'm a lucky man. So anyway, the point is, me listening to Cannibal Corpse is not making me any tougher. I don't think only listening to death metal that was made before 1995 makes somebody a tough guy. And it doesn't even make them somebody with discerning taste. You know, if you listening to Memphis May Fire or Motionless in White, I'm not going to judge you for that. Not too much. I've got far more important things that I would judge you far more harshly for. Toughness doesn't come from passively consuming art. It comes from what you do. So with that said, I think you'll really enjoy the riff of the week that plays at the end of this episode. But most importantly, read philosophy, listen to metal. I love you.